I don't know if anyone's ever had a moment where something they've been dreaming about for years, something that took sweat, sacrifice, and straight-up prayer to achieve, gets shattered in seconds. I had that moment last Thursday, and I'm still not sure if I'm angry, embarrassed, or just damn tired. So yeah, let me tell you what happened. I'm a 25-year-old black guy, nothing flashy about me. Born and raised in Georgia. Moved to a new county not too long ago because I got this job I couldn't pass up. Warehouse gig, decent pay, good people. But it's out in a more affluent area. You know what I mean by that. Lot of old money, yoga moms and Range Rovers, and folks who clutch their purses when I walk by, that kind of neighborhood. Anyway, 2 weeks ago I finally bought my first car. A 2012 Honda Accord. Burgundy. Clean title. Not a scratch on her. Nothing new, but it was mine. I'd been saving for over a year, working overtime, skipping dinners out, walking to work in the cold, dodging rain like it was my side hustle. And now I had a set of wheels that could get me where I needed to be, especially to work, which is a 40-minute drive away. That morning, I was on my way home. Just finished a shift. Nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't speeding, not even blasting music. I was tired, thinking about what leftovers I had in the fridge and whether I'd have enough energy to hit the gym. Normal stuff. Then, out of nowhere, like straight out of a damn movie, a white Mercedes shot out from a side yard and slammed right into the front passenger side of my car. Boom. I remember the sound first. Metal against metal. That sick crunch that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. I hit the brakes hard. The car jerked. Smoke curled up from under the hood. I sat there for a second, heart jackhammering in my chest, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to earth. I'd never been in a real accident before. My first thought? Oh God, not the car. Please not the car. My second? Am I okay? Is she okay? I threw the door open and stumbled out. My knees were shaky. My mouth was dry. I looked over and saw her car, brand new looking white Mercedes SUV, sitting halfway across the sidewalk like it didn't give a damn about pedestrian safety. Then the door opened, and she stepped out. Blonde, maybe early 40s. Designer sunglasses. Tight yoga gear. Looked like she was either on her way to a spin class or a private wine tasting. She looked at her car first. Not me. Not my busted Accord. Not even checking if I was okay. Just stared at her front bumper like it was a dead pet. Then she turned and looked at me, and something changed in her face. Her brows pulled together. Lips curled up. And she stormed toward me like I was the one who just ran over her dog. What the hell did you just do? I blinked. I couldn't even form words at first. I pointed back at her car, tried to stammer something like, "You pulled out," but she didn't let me finish. Do you have any idea what this car cost? Are you blind? Are you drunk? I opened my mouth again, and that's when it happened. She slapped me. Hard. Right across the face. Like we were in some old-timey soap opera. I froze. The world just stopped. I could still feel the sting on my cheek. Could hear the birds. Could hear my engine hissing. But I couldn't move. I stood there, in the middle of that quiet neighborhood, on someone's freshly trimmed lawn, while this rich white woman screamed at me like I'd broken into her house. And all I could think was, is this really happening right now? I didn't yell back. I didn't raise a hand. I didn't even step forward. Because the truth is, I was terrified. Not of her, but of what it would look like if I reacted. I'm a 6 feet 1 inch black man in a neighborhood where I'm already a stranger. She's a blonde woman in yoga pants with a Mercedes. I knew what that looked like. I knew how quick a situation could turn on me. And I couldn't afford it. Not with my job. Not with my record being clean. Not with me just finally getting a break. So I just stood there. Stood there while she kept yelling. Kept calling me names. Kept threatening to call the cops. "You're gonna pay for this," she hissed. "You're done." And that's when I heard footsteps. Multiple people coming up behind me. Voices. Some angry. Some concerned. All white. I braced myself. I thought, great. Now I'm surrounded. But then something happened I didn't expect. One older man stepped between us and looked her dead in the eye and said, "Ma'am, we saw everything. You were the one who pulled out." He wasn't speeding. He had the right of way. She blinked. Another woman, maybe in her 60s, came up beside him and added, "And we saw you slap him." That's assault. I stood there in disbelief, still not saying a word. The blonde woman's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked around at the small crowd gathering. 5, maybe 6 people now, and her face turned red. She suddenly wasn't yelling anymore. Suddenly, she looked nervous. And for the first time since the crash, I felt like maybe I wasn't totally alone. So there I was, standing on this perfect little street in front of someone's freshly trimmed hedges, busted a cord behind me, cheeks still stinging, and now a small crowd gathering like it was some kind of sidewalk drama. Which, to be fair, it kind of was. The woman, I never got her name, so let's just call her Mercedes Barbie, had gone from full volume screaming to this tight-lipped silence. Her eyes flicked around the street like she was looking for a way out. But there was nowhere to run, not with 6 people staring at her like she just kicked a puppy. One of the older guys who came up, dude looked like he could have been a retired vet or maybe a high school football coach, crossed his arms and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You better be real careful who you raise your hand to, lady. That boy didn't do a damn thing wrong." That boy was me. And even though the words stung a little coming from his mouth, I knew he meant it in that old man way, not trying to belittle me. He was standing with me. And right now, I needed all the backup I could get. I hadn't said a word yet. Not because I didn't want to, believe me, I had a whole speech ready in my head, but because something inside me was just locked up. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was trauma. Or maybe it was the fact that I could already hear the sirens in the distance. Yeah, someone had called the cops. Not me. And probably not her either. I think she was hoping to just yell her way into looking like the victim. But now that the truth was unraveling in front of actual witnesses, someone decided the law needed to step in. A woman next to me whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. We saw it all. You're gonna be okay." I nodded, barely. Inside, I was a mess. My thoughts were spinning. I kept thinking about my job. What if I missed another shift because of this? What if they fired me? I just started getting on my feet. My rent was due in a week. My insurance was the cheapest package I could afford, which pretty much meant good luck. And now, my first car, my dream, the symbol of every damn sacrifice I'd made, was sitting there with its front end crushed like a soda can. And now cops were coming. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, no sirens. A younger officer stepped out first, white guy, probably in his late 30s. Clean-shaven, buzz-cut. He walked up with that look, you know the one. Not angry, not friendly, just blank. Like he was walking into a situation he didn't want to deal with, but had to. Behind him came an older black cop, maybe late 50s, quiet eyes, steady movements. The kind of man who's seen way too much of the world to get rattled. I didn't know whether to feel safer or more nervous. The younger cop walked straight to Mercedes Barbie. She jumped into performance mode like someone hit a switch. "Officer." Thank God. This man was driving way too fast, and before she could even finish, one of the older women from the crowd cut her off. "That's not true. We all saw what happened." She pointed at the street. He was driving slow, following the rules. She pulled out of her driveway without even looking, and then she hit him and slapped him in the face. Mercedes Barbie froze. Her eyes flicked around. You could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. The younger cop looked confused. Like this wasn't how the story usually went. Like maybe he'd walked in expecting to cuff me and be done with it. Then the black officer stepped in. Calm, direct, voice low. "Sir," he said, addressing me. "Are you okay?" That broke whatever spell I was under. I swallowed and finally found my voice. "I think so. Just shaken up." He nodded slowly. "Did you put your hands on her at any point?" I shook my head. "No, sir. Not once. I didn't even raise my voice." "She hit you?" "Yes, sir. Right across the face. Right after the crash." There was a long pause. Then the woman, the older one who first stood up for me, pulled out her phone and said, "I got it on video." God bless her. She pressed play, and we all heard it. The screech, the slam, the yelling, and finally, the sound of a slap. Loud, clear, unmistakable. Mercedes Barbie turned ghost white. She knew it was over. The younger cop looked at his partner, unsure. The older one nodded slightly, and then they walked her aside to question her. I leaned against the hood of my car, heart still pounding. That's when it hit me. If no one had been there, if those people hadn't spoken up, if that lady hadn't recorded it, if I had reacted the way my body wanted to in the heat of the moment, I'd be the one in cuffs. That realization sunk into me like ice water. I'd done nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. And yet, if the angles had been slightly different, if she had cried harder, or if I had defended myself, this whole story would have ended with me in jail. Or worse. And I knew that. And that's a terrifying thing to know. The cops finished talking to her. The older one walked back over to me. She's being cited for reckless driving, he said. And you can press charges for assault if you want. I looked at him. I don't know if I can afford a lawyer. He paused, then said something I didn't expect. You might not need one. It's all on camera. But I'd recommend filing a report just in case. I nodded again. Then he leaned in slightly and added, you handled yourself well. A lot of people wouldn't have. And then he walked away. Mercedes Barbie was still arguing, still flailing her hands, but her voice was smaller now, like a balloon slowly deflating. I didn't watch her get back in her car. I just stood there, arms crossed, while a tow truck came for my Accord. My dream car. My damn symbol of hard work and hope. I was watching it get pulled away, piece by piece, and wondering if the universe was trying to tell me something. Was I cursed? Or was this just what it meant to be a black man trying to exist in someone else's idea of a safe neighborhood? After the tow truck pulled away with what used to be my dream car, I stood on the curb holding a clipboard with the incident report in one hand and a little Ziploc bag in the other, the one they gave me with the shattered remains of my front bumper emblem. Like I was supposed to keep it as a souvenir or something. My hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten since early morning, and now the adrenaline crash was hitting me like a ton of bricks. I sat on a low brick wall in front of someone's house, just breathing, staring down at the torn pavement like it owed me answers. People started to disperse. One by one, they gave me quiet nods, murmured a take care, young man, or hope things work out for you, and went back to their daily routines. Joggers passed. A dog barked. Life moved on. But I didn't. I sat there for another 10 minutes, maybe longer, until I realized my manager had called twice and texted once. You good? That's all it said. I texted back. Accident. Car's wrecked. I'll explain later. Then I stood up, wiped my hands on my pants, and started walking. I was 1.5 miles from the nearest bus stop. No rideshare money. No family nearby. Just me and the Georgia heat, which, by the way, is a special kind of mean when you're dressed in a dark hoodie and your brain's still trying to process everything. I walked that 1.5 miles like I was dragging the world behind me. My legs were lead. My head was a riot. And my heart? It felt like it was cracked straight down the center. When I finally got home, sweaty, exhausted, and emotionally fried, I collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling. And that's when the panic really set in. Because everything I'd been holding back, the rage, the fear, the shame, started pouring in like floodwater. I kept replaying it in my head, her face, her voice, her slap. The way she acted like she owned the truth. The way the young cop almost believed her. The way I felt like a child, powerless, paralyzed, hoping someone else would vouch for me, and thank God they did. Or I don't even want to imagine what could have happened. And beneath it all, there was this other feeling I hadn't fully processed yet. Humiliation. Not because I did something wrong, but because I didn't do anything at all. I didn't defend myself. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't even speak for the first 5 minutes after it happened. And I hated that. I hated how that silence made me feel small. How it made me question who I was. I kept wondering, if I'd been white, would I have frozen like that? And I didn't like the answer that formed in my gut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even eat. I just sat there in the dark, scrolling through used car listings like I had the money for one. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Insurance called the next morning. Said they'd review the footage and police report, but it'd take a few days. A few days? That might as well have been a year. I needed to work. I needed to eat. I needed to keep my head above water. I borrowed a bike from my neighbor and pedaled my way to the warehouse the next day. 25 minutes of hell. My legs still hurt from it. But when I pulled into the parking lot, sweaty, winded, already late, I saw something that made me stop cold. The white Mercedes. Same one. Parked in front of the office building across the lot. I thought I was hallucinating. I rubbed my eyes. Blinked twice. It was her car. The slap-throwing, scream-summoning, justice-dodging Mercedes Barbie had somehow beaten me to my own job. I didn't even know what to do. My first thought? Is she pressing charges against me? Is she here with some kind of lawyer? And then I saw him. A man in a gray tailored suit standing beside her. Black loafers that looked like they cost more than my rent. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. He was talking to her quietly, but firm. And then she spotted me. She turned. Locked eyes. And for the first time since the accident, her entire posture changed. Shoulders dropped. Chin dipped. She didn't look angry. She didn't look entitled. She looked scared? No, not quite. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Regret. The man beside her looked over at me too. Then he nodded like he recognized me, like he'd heard about me. And that's when my stomach dropped. I realized who he was. Mr. Mitchell, my company's regional director. The man I'd never met in person but had heard plenty about. Big deal. Suits flown in from New York kind of deal. And now he was standing in front of me, flanked by the woman who slapped me like I was dirt under her shoe. I thought, this is it. I'm getting fired. Or worse. I'm being accused of something. I'm going to jail. Excuse me, he said, walking toward me with calm, purposeful steps. His voice was smooth, controlled. You're Darnell, right? I nodded, swallowing hard. My throat was bone dry. He looked me over for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. I wanted to thank you. Personally. I blinked. What for? He glanced back at Mercedes Barbie, who now looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole, then turned back to me. For not reacting. For showing restraint. And for handling something ugly with more grace than most people twice your age would have managed. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My brain was spinning too fast. He continued. She's my sister-in-law. And she lied to my face. Said you attacked her. Said you threatened her. Said the crash was your fault. He looked at me again, this time with something like shame in his eyes. But the footage, the witnesses, the officer's report, they all told the truth. And I'm embarrassed. Embarrassed that someone in my family would behave like that. I stood there like a statue. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. This won't fix what happened, he said. But maybe it helps a little. And she'd like to say something too, if you'll allow it. I took the envelope from Mr. Mitchell without opening it. It felt heavy, the kind of heavy that tells you it's not just paper inside. But my hands didn't move. My eyes stayed locked on the woman standing behind him. Mercedes Barbie. Except now, she didn't look like Barbie. She looked like a deflated balloon after a party, mascara slightly smudged, lips pursed, posture wilted. For the first time, she looked human. Small, even. Maybe that's what guilt does when it has nowhere to run. She stepped forward slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. That was it. 2 words. Like that would wipe the whole thing away. I stared at her, trying to figure out how I felt. Angry? Relieved? Vindicated? No, none of those. Mostly I just felt numb. You slapped me in the face, I said, quietly. You tried to destroy my life. You lied to the police. Lied to your family. All because you didn't want to admit you made a mistake. She flinched. I know, she said. I was scared. I panicked. And I just reacted. Scared. I repeated, almost laughing. Scared of what, exactly? That I might sue you? That people might see you're not perfect. She said nothing. And I realized, maybe for the first time, this apology wasn't even about me. It was for her. To make herself feel better. To clean the slate in her head. That's why people like her say sorry. Not for justice. For peace of mind. I looked back at Mr. Mitchell. Can I still work today? I asked. His eyebrows lifted. You still want to? I need to. He nodded slowly. That's admirable. But I don't think you should. I think you should rest. Think. And when you're ready, come talk to me. I have a position for you. In the main office. I blinked. Wait. You're offering me. Not a handout, he interrupted. I've reviewed your file. You're smart. Efficient. People like working with you. I think you're underutilized. And after what I saw yesterday, I'd rather have someone like you in leadership than half the people who think a suit makes them superior. He patted my shoulder. Take the day. We'll talk tomorrow. Then he turned and walked back to his car, leaving me standing in that quiet lot with a crumpled apology behind me and a future I hadn't seen coming. I opened the envelope when I got inside. $5,000. Cash. Neatly stacked. No note. Just silence. That night, I didn't tell anyone. Not about the money. Not about the promotion offer. Not about the apology. I just sat on my front steps, legs sore from the bike ride home, thinking about how fast life can twist. 1 minute you're a victim, and the next you're being handed a better opportunity than you ever imagined. But it didn't feel like a win. Because what haunted me the most wasn't her slap. It wasn't even the wreck. It was the silence that followed. The part where no one was around yet, and I was alone. Frozen. The part where I didn't know if the world would believe me. The part where I felt like my life wasn't mine anymore. You don't forget that. You carry it with you. But here's the thing I learned, that feeling, that fear, it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't get to. The next morning, I walked into the main office wearing the cleanest button-up I had. It still smelled like laundry, detergent, and anxiety. Mitchell was waiting. He didn't do a formal interview. He just slid me a folder and said, "Let's see what you can do." And now? It's been 2 months. I took the job. It came with a raise, benefits, a seat at a table I never thought I'd be invited to. And Mercedes Barbie? She never showed her face again. I heard she moved. Quietly. Privately. Some say it was shame. Others say she couldn't handle people knowing the truth. I don't care. Because this story isn't about her anymore. It's about me. It's about a kid who worked his ass off to buy his first car and watched it get wrecked by privilege. It's about restraint in the face of injustice. It's about the power of witnesses, of cameras, of strangers who spoke up when it mattered. But most of all, it's about control. About taking back the narrative. About not letting someone else decide who you are or what you're worth based on skin, salary, or circumstance. I'm still that same kid, just with a new desk and a company badge now. And I'm still not sure how to process what happened. But I know this. I didn't punch back. I didn't shout. I didn't fold. And maybe that's the biggest win of all.